personal finance expert, is here. Hello, Mary.
Hello, Jesse.
Good timing. I just got an email from my bank that says, Jesse, your KiwiSaver fund choice could make $120,000 difference. And then there's a little asterisk. I'm sure the asterisk has lots of conditions attached, but they're probably making the same point that you've made all these years, which is it's not just a matter of kind of going with whatever the default is, or picking the safest looking one. You actually do need to have a little bit of a think about what fund is right for you, because over the years it will really pay off.
Yes, that's interesting. Are you in a low risk one?
I think they probably just send it to all their customers.
Is
I'm not in a low risk one now. But they've got lots of reasons to join their scheme, which I think is the point of the newsletter.
Funny that.
Yeah. They used to get in trouble, not to say that they're doing anything wrong, but they used to get a bit in trouble, the banks, didn't they? If you'd sit down with a quote advisor and they'd say, hey, well, guess what? Here's what you need to do. You need to sign up to our KiwiSaver and get some of our insurance.
And our mortgage. Yes, quite.
It's not really very neutral.
I think these days they're more obliged to disclose that that's what they're doing. I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Anyway, I just thought I'd mention it because it just came through as I was talking to you.
Yeah.
And you're talking KiwiSaver this week.
Yes, and the FMA, the Financial Markets Authority, published its annual KiwiSaver report. It's several weeks ago now, maybe about a month. And it's for the year ending March the 31st, so it takes quite a few months for them to get it out. But there was one thing that struck me about it that was particularly interesting that I haven't heard other people noticing really, or pointing out, and that is the increasing use of growth funds. But perhaps we should just start at the top here and just say that 62% of the population of New Zealand is in KiwiSaver now, so we're getting sort of up towards 2/3.
Yeah.
And I suspect that it'd be quite a lot more than 2/3 of people aged between 18 and 65 who are the ones that get the extra benefits from being in. I think there are probably, this is only me guessing, quite a lot of over 65s who are not in because they didn't get it, or they never were under 65. They were over 65 when the whole thing started in 2007. And just a quick aside, KiwiSaver works pretty well for people in retirement. It's not the brilliant thing it is for younger ones because you're not getting government and employer money, but it is still a good place to be parking your money. But the total money in there, and I heard you promoting this earlier and saying that it's over 100 billion. That's actually as of last March, and it's quite a lot more now.
Really?
It's growing because the markets have done pretty well over recent months. So it's a lot of money. It almost doubled what it was in 2019. So in 5 years, the amount of money in there has doubled, which is quite impressive.
It is,
really. Yeah, and probably quite a big part of that is that so many people are now in the growth funds, which they're defining as growth and aggressive. So those are funds that are either mainly in shares or fully in shares, really. Some of them hold some property, but not many. There are a few that hold only property, commercial property, but most of them are just shares, basically, or largely shares. And there's now nearly half of all KiwiSaver money is in growth funds, 46%, and 46% of members are in these growth and aggressive funds, which is, and that's growing sort of fast. There's an increasing impetus for people to be moving into the higher risk funds. And
not to be a Debbie Downer, but I guess that also suggests that it might drop temporarily back below 100 billion at some point.
Oh yeah, look, it could. Yeah, although as I say, there's been a bit of a buffer now since it got to the 100 billion. But you're quite right. If the market crashes, if we had another 1987 market crash or global financial crisis sort of downturn, where money, can actually halve or almost halve, then you're quite right. That could bring the numbers right down.
Yeah.
And while that doesn't feel like it's going to happen tomorrow, it might. It's really incredibly hard to predict what's going to happen. But the FMA is saying investors have become more comfortable with selecting growth funds compared to 10 years ago. And this tells us that due to compound returns and fund selection, the milestone of reaching 200 billion will arrive a lot sooner. So they're saying now that more and more people are into the growth funds, the 200 million or a billion will come a lot quicker than the 100 billion came.
And sort of outside the scope of our chat today, but I remember talking to Sam Stubbs about this, and he really feels like it'll make a significant difference to New Zealand's economy, having this big pool of money, invested in or available to invest in things.
Yes, that's right.
Be a game changer.
Yes, especially if
looking for a home, really. $200 billion looking for a home.
And yes, Sam Stubbs, of course, runs Simplicity, and they're doing some quite interesting things. We've talked about it a bit before with building rent to. What is it?
Build to rent?
Build to rent is what I'm looking for buildings, yes. And one of the great outcomes of that could be that they're expected to be longer term tenancy terms. What do you call them?
Yeah.
What do you call it? When a tenant signs an agreement.
Tenancies.
Yeah, tenancies, I suppose.
Long-term tenancies.
So that people renters can go and stay in a place for decades, perhaps, which is quite a good alternative to owning your own home, actually. But we're digressing here a little bit. But along with the same trend of more and more people getting into the growth funds and the high growth funds as well, there are fewer getting into conservative, which is what you would expect. So there were nearly 40% in 2014 in conservative funds, and now it's down to about 20%. So it's about halved, the people in the conservative funds. A lot of them have moved up to balanced, the middle level ones, and then balanced ones have moved up to the higher risk funds.
You've told us before the default funds have changed.
That's
You no longer
really
default but that wouldn't account for the movement, would it?
It did mean that people who were in default funds suddenly got moved up to balance.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Yes.
Ones that are already in.
That's a really good point. So that got them up from conservative to balanced, middle level funds. But there's still a lot of people who've had to actually make their own choice to either they were in a default and have moved up to a higher risk one, or they just went to a different provider, another provider, and got into the higher risk. And it's, there are two basic rules about moving up to higher risk. One is that you're not planning to spend the money within 10 years, because if you are, there is too big a risk that it might go down and not recover in time for when you want to take it out. Yeah. And the other is that you're moving to higher risk. You've got to promise yourself you're not going to chicken out when the markets go down.
It only works if you stick with it.
You've got to stick with it through thick and thin.
And people might be thinking, well, even if I wanted to spend it within 10 years, I couldn't because it's locked in. Well, you can take it out for a house, of course, or you might turn 65 in the next 10 years.
That's right.
So both reasons to think about how you're splitting it. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. So it's people shouldn't be putting money they're planning to spend within 10 years, I don't think, in the growth funds. Some people still do. Yeah,
it's a roll of the dice, though, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is, yeah. Another trend that came through that's not so good is looking at people who are not contributing at all to KiwiSaver. And that has risen over the year, though the year ending last March, to 39% of all members. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's but although it was 44% 10 years ago, so it's down somewhat, but you have got quite a big chunk of people not contributing to KiwiSaver. The interesting thing when you look a bit further into that, though, is that not all that big a proportion of them are on saving suspensions, i.e. they're employees and they've stopped contributing to KiwiSaver, perhaps because they've got into financial difficulties and are not doing so. But the vast majority are just people who are not contributing. They're not on a saving suspension, so that suggests they're not an employee. They're perhaps self-employed or or older or younger than under 18, over 65, they, let's see, about a third of them are over 65. So that's discouraging a lot of people from contributing to KiwiSaver because they're not getting extra money coming in from the government. Quite a lot of them are getting it if they're an employee still after over 65. There's a story in the Herald the other day about it. One of the reporters did some research, surveyed employers. There's quite a lot of employers now who, even though they don't legally have to give money to employees once they're over 65, they don't have to put their 3% in. A lot of them do.
And you suspected that might be the case, didn't you?
Yes. And, you get quotes from bosses of big companies saying, well, that would be pretty mean. Jesse, you've turned 65. We're not putting any money into KiwiSaver anymore. But some do it. Yeah, it's so the fact that people are not contributing, a lot of people are not contributing, is not as kind of bad as it seems. But still, I would urge people to really try and just even get, $5 a week in there, or if you can. If you're not employed, you're not going to get any money coming in from your employer, but you are from the government, and it's just always really good to get that extra little bit coming in from them.
Got it.
Which does multiply your money by 1.5. If you're anything up to 1,042 that you put in, the government will put in up to 521, and so it's multiplying your money by 1.5, which is quite powerful. Yeah.
I once saw you do some incredibly complicated maths in your column to demonstrate why that doesn't equal a 50% return on your money. And I was like, how? And then I finally got it at the end, but we won't try to explain that.
Well, we can say just quickly that it is that effective in the first year.
Right.
But that money that you put in last year, while it got a 50% boost last year, is now sitting in your account, not earning any. It's only the money coming in this year that earns extra from the government.
Yeah, okay.
And as your overall balance builds over the years, the vast majority of your money is sitting there from previous years. And so it's not getting any extra boost. It's only the new money that gets a boost. So yes, when KiwiSaver first came out, people were saying, hey, you get a 50% return. And what's more, in employees were getting a more or less 100% return, although the employer contribution is taxed. But it's still, 70-80% sort of return on that money. But that's only in the first year. Nonetheless, it still makes quite a big difference over the years, getting that extra.
It'd be hard to find something that beat it in terms of a return.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It gives it that extra sort of edge over other investments.
And as you always say, no risk. It's a no-risk return too.
That bonus, yes, is no risk. Yeah. But basically, KiwiSaver's got risk in that it's got volatility. And theoretically, you could lose your money because it's not government guaranteed, but as the years go by, that feels just very, very unlikely that anyone would ever actually lose their money in KiwiSaver. I mean, the government monitors it pretty closely, and I just can't imagine that happening. And there's, the supervisors watching that the providers are doing what they say they're doing, and I think that's an unrealistic risk, really. Getting back to the annual return, the funds that were labelled socially responsible or similar, the number of funds has grown more than 30% in a year, so it's become a kind of thing, flavour of the day kind of thing to have your...
Well, hopefully
provider.
Not just flavour of the day. Hopefully a sign of things to come, Mary.
Yes, and hopefully it's kind of real. I mean, a lot of these funds that are socially responsible, or ESG, they sometimes called, which stands for environmental, social and governance. I think it's social.
That's it.
Yeah. A lot of them can be, but once over lightly. They're okay. They don't invest in munitions, and they don't invest in tobacco, but beyond that, they're not doing much more than that. But then more and more of them are doing really diligent work on making sure they're investing in only sort of socially good companies. And I was just reading some more information about that this morning. The broad consensus seems to be that your returns are not higher or lower in general. Different people claim sometimes that the returns are better or worse than just in any other fund that's not got this kind of ethical overlay. But I think they're much the same, really. But while the annual return says there are a lot more funds labelled that way, the number of people choosing those funds is not growing very fast. It's growing, but not fast. And it's now only about 48,000 people are in those sort of funds, and that's talking out of 3.3 million. So it's a tiny percentage, actually. It's surprising, isn't it? Yeah. I think a lot of us kind of think we should, and it doesn't always quite.
It's also one of those things that makes a good media story, you know? Like, it's interesting that these funds are doing this, but it's, maybe the amount that they're talked about in the media doesn't reflect how many people are actually acting on them.
Yeah. There's been a lot of people, Mindful Money website, which is the one to go to if you want information on this, does surveys that show, well over half of people say they want to take this sort of thing into account. I think a lot of it is that people just don't quite get round to it. Because you've got to do a bit of research into what you're in now, and although it's not hard.
Yeah.
It's on the Mindful Money website. All the KiwiSaver funds are on there.
Maybe just the fact that they have these socially responsible funds as options is likely to influence the behaviour of companies in its own right. Like, hey, let's make sure that we're squeaky clean so people don't invest their money into these other green companies.
Yes.
Let's give them no reason to leave.
That's a really good point. And companies across the board are probably making, I'm not talking now about fund managers, but the companies they invest in, are probably tending to be a bit cleaner than they used to be, hiring perhaps using electric cars in their fleet rather than gas cars or whatever, little by little. I hope we're trending in the right direction. One more point about that came out of the annual report that wasn't some more good news was that total fees have dropped from about 1% to about 0.7%, the 1% in 2014 to about 0.7% now. So that's as a percentage of the total money. So that's, it's suggesting that fees are coming down. Having said
You've
that,
always felt we were too high in New Zealand, haven't
you? And I think, and people like, I think the FMA, certainly some government people have said we could do better. New Zealand KiwiSaver providers could do better because as the amount of money in their funds increases, they get economies of scale. They don't need as much money to run their basic business. As they don't need twice as much to run the business when there's twice as much money in it, if you see what I mean. And so we could probably be seeing even more drops in fees. But gosh, there are some pretty cheap KiwiSaver fees out there now. If you look on Smart Investor Tool, there's some of them are below. What was that one I was looking at the other day? 0.07%. They're low. Yeah, they're low.
That drop might also be possibly due to the changes in the default funds.
Yes, certainly.
So they went with the cheap ones, didn't they?
Yes, the government finally said we're going to go after the lower fee funds, which I totally applauded. It's so I would say to anyone, if your KiwiSaver fund is charging more than 1%, that's, you might want to be looking around, and even if it's charging less. And a lot of the newcomers in the KiwiSaver market are coming in with really low fees. They're realising that that's the area to get into, and so that's happening. The final thing that was interesting in the report was looking at people switching between funds, so going from high to low risk or low to high risk, and there were about 200,000 in the year, which is not that many when we're talking about $3.3 million members. most of them made only one switch, and that's fine. I mean, given the trends we're talking about, probably quite a lot of them were moving up to a higher risk fund,
Yeah.
and therefore probably getting better returns over the years. Over 2,000, though, made 5 switches or more. So those are the people.
What are they up to?
Yes, yeah. It's obviously, I suppose, they think they can beat the market. They're saying, I'm going to move into a higher risk one when the market's about to go up, and I'm going to get out of it when it's going to go down. I'm guessing, because I can't imagine what else would make them do that. And that's an absolute loser's game. Yeah, not one that people just can't get it right. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mary.
It's a pleasure, Jesse.
Great to see you.
You too.
And great to hear that KiwiSaver is going in the right direction. Mary Holm, our personal finance expert, she's in every couple of Thursdays. And you can find our previous conversations, including her advice on any number of things, including mortgages and investments and KiwiSaver and budgeting tips. Look for the podcasts page on the RNZ website, and all of our conversations with Mary going back, I reckon, 5 or 7 years now, are in that location.